Hello friends, I'm Michael Kingswood. I write fiction for fun and profit. And this is Story Time, where I share my stories with you in the hopes that you'll like them and have fun, come back for more, and of course buy books. On Tuesdays, which is what today is, yep, it's Tuesday, we're going through my book Glimmer, the first book in my Glimmer Chronicles Heroic Fantasy series, which I wrote several years back, and now it's come into a series of 7 novels. Number 8 is going to be coming along here before too much longer. And we got several short stories in that series as well. Ongoing, lots of fun. You're going to love it. We've been covering it here the last several weeks on this channel. And if we're at chapter 23 now. If you didn't get started with us, you can go back in the playlist and start from the beginning. Or you can just go, pick up the book. Anyway, this is chapter 23. As I said, it's called To Catch a Rat. I wrote it. I'm not reading it. We got a voice actor for that. He did a pretty good job. You're going to like it. So let's sit back, have some fun, and talk to you on the other end.
Chapter 23. To Catch a Rat. Fendig left the constable's office shortly before noon. That was not out of character from what Julian had seen. But instead of turning right toward Main Street and the tavern where he normally took his lunch, he turned left, toward the makeshift archery range at the edge of town. He knows there's a fight coming. Maybe he just wants some practice. Julian snorted. Fat chance. He could have joined us there every day for the last week. Raedric chuckled softly. True, but give the man the benefit of the doubt. Benefit of the doubt was one thing, but that was not their purpose this afternoon. They were out to catch a rat. Julian and Raedric were not making use of Melanie's concealing spell this time, just good old-fashioned cover and concealment. They wanted to be able to confront Fendig if their suspicions proved true, after all. So they crouched behind the door in the back of a shop that stood adjacent to the constable's office. As Fendig walked out of their field of view, they crept out and darted around the next building, then the next to keep him in sight. Sure enough, he did not turn into the archery range. Instead, he continued on into the grasslands east of town. Cover became more difficult as they left town, so Raedric and Julian let Fendig get further ahead of them. Fortunately, there were a few hillocks, bushes, and trees scattered here and there they could use for cover. A good thing, too, since Fendig occasionally looked backwards, clearly checking to see if he was being followed. Being awfully cautious, isn't he? That says it all right there. Not necessarily, Julian replied. He could be meeting his mistress or something. Raedric gave him a look that practically screamed, Are you serious? Julian just shrugged and smirked. Hey, you never know. Fendig continued on for a couple miles until a large copse of trees came into view on a hilltop off to the southeast. He veered to the right, directly toward the copse, and picked up his pace. From time to time, he looked skyward at the position of the sun, but he no longer looked behind. Either he was convinced he was in the clear, or he was pressed for time, or both. After a brief conversation, the two friends decided to risk being seen by closing the distance between themselves and Fendig. They set off at a jog, circling off to the side and following the rise and fall of the terrain toward the hilltop in question, being careful to keep the rise of a hill between Fendig and themselves as long as they could, to avoid being seen. But eventually they came to a point where there was no more cover between the copse and them, and they were forced to wait until Fendig entered the trees before sprinting to the copse themselves. For a moment, Julian thought he had given them the slip. The copse was larger than it had appeared from the distance. It would not be difficult for him to slip out while they were looking for him within the trees. But then the sound of a branch breaking, followed by a loud thud and a muffled curse, issued from the undergrowth ahead. Julian bit back a chuckle and exchanged a sardonic look with Raedric, who looked just as amused and relieved as Julian felt. Raedric indicated, using hand signals, that they should separate and circle around Fendig. Julian nodded and moved slowly around to the left, being careful to disturb as little of the underbrush as possible. It would not do to give away his presence. In reality, he need not have worried. Fendig shoved his way through the copse without bothering to try to be quiet. Julian shook his head in amusement. Fendig would never make it as a, "Took you long enough." Julian froze. The speaker's voice was deep and gravelly, and came from the area ahead of him and to the right around where Fendig was. Moving slowly, Julian tried to see who it was, but even without more than the buds of leaves on the plant's branches, there was too much undergrowth between him and them to make anything out.
Sorry, it took longer than I thought to get away.
That was Fendig. He sounded nervous, but not surprised to be meeting the other man here. It looked like Julian's suspicions were correct. Raedric would owe him a drink after this. Smiling thinly, Julian cautiously moved forward until he reached a place where he could see what was going on. Fendig stood facing 3 rough-looking men in a small clearing. They could only have been Eisenhoff's men. They wore the same leather and steel armor the others of his band wore, and they had the shifty look of men who prey off others. No wonder Fendig looked about ready to jump out of his skin from nerves.
"So what do you have for us?"
The man in the middle was the speaker. A few years older than the others, he had several visible scars on his head, neck, and arms. No doubt who the leader was here. Fendig swallowed and looked around the area quickly, almost as though he was afraid to speak. Finally, he replied,
What did you do with the constable?
The brigand snorted.
"What do you care? He's out of the picture, and now you're no longer the deputy. That was what you wanted, isn't it?"
Yes, but
Fendig wrung his hands anxiously, then tried again.
I thought maybe you'd scare him off. Discredit him, not... you know.
All 3 men burst out in mocking laughter, which lasted for almost a full minute. Wiping his eyes as he got himself under control, the leader shook his head.
"Don't worry, little constable, he's not dead."
His grin turned positively vicious.
"Not yet."
Fendig shrank back, his eyes growing wide. The leader rolled his eyes and said,
"What did you think was gonna happen? Did you think we were just gonna let them spy on us? Should we have just asked, please, with sugar on top? Stop doing that, and, by the way, send us the constable so our pal Fendig won't have to live with his condescension anymore."
Fendig's gaze fell to the ground, and he shook his head. Clearly, he was out of his depth. Scared, ashamed, guilt-ridden. Julian almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then the brigand leader pulled a small pouch off his belt and shook it. It jingled loudly. From the sound of things, it was full of coins.
"Maybe this will help you feel better,"
the leader said. He tossed the pouch to Fendig, who caught it with a half-smile. The smile became a full-faced grin of avarice when Fendig looked inside the pouch at the coins. Whatever temptation Julian had to feel sorry for him evaporated completely.
"What do you have for us today, constable?"
The brigand leader put special emphasis on the title, and Fendig's grin expanded a little bit.
They're focusing on building defenses around the town,
Fendig said.
I think the incident with their scouts has them a bit spooked.
"Is that right?"
said the brigand leader. It was not a question. Fendig nodded quickly.
"Anything else?"
Fendig frowned and stood in silence for a time. Thumbing at his lip, he appeared uncertain as he pondered things. Then his eyes widened.
Yes, there is one more thing. There is a woman working with them now.
"A woman?"
The brigand leader looked surprised. Fendig nodded.
The lone survivor of your attack on a merchant caravan in the past, 2 weeks ago. For whatever reason, she is involved now. Though what she does, I could not say.
The brigand leader frowned, but did not say anything. Fendig apparently took his silence for disapproval and swallowed hard.
I know she gave instructions to the scouts. The survivor said...
"Survivor?"
Fendig blinked.
Yes, you took the constable, but the other man made it back to town.
The brigand leader's grimace made Fendig go pale, until he gestured for Fendig to continue.
He said she told him to bury things to protect the campsite, but didn't say how they would. I'm not sure what that means, but she seems to have some authority with the 2 men the mayor hired. They do what she says.
Julian had to stop himself from snorting. They did not take orders from Melanie. The brigand leader had a different reaction entirely. His eyes grew wide when Fendig mentioned burying the stones. He glanced at his fellows, who had similar reactions, then returned his attention to Fendig.
"You need to get more information about this woman. Who is she? Where did she come from? Who does she spend time with? Every detail. Do you understand?"
Fendig looked confused, but he nodded acquiescence.
"Good. Meet us back here in 3 days, and you better have something useful to tell us."
Fendig swallowed. He looked as though he was going to say something more, but instead he just nodded and backed away until he was out of reach. Then he turned and hurried back the way he came, snapped twigs and branches with every step.
"That's bad news, Yosef,"
said the man to the brigand leader's right after Fendig was out of earshot. The leader, Yosef apparently, nodded, though he looked uncertain.
"Possibly."
The other brigand snorted.
Bollocks! Just superstition from a woman who don't know no better.
"And the 2 heroes?"
Yosef spat the last word in disgust. He snorted again.
The same. Only reason we know the difference is we've seen the real thing.
The leader shrugged as though conceding his comrade's point.
Regardless, Farza will want to learn of this. Let's get back to base.
As they turned to leave, a branch moving on the far side of the clearing caught Julian's attention. Looking there more carefully, he saw Raedric through the branches. He had a deadly serious expression on his face. Pointing at the three brigands, he made a quick cutting gesture in the air. Julian nodded in reply. He agreed completely. Those three did not need to return to give that report to Eisenhoff. Fendig's expression when Julian and Raedric pushed the leader of the three brigands ahead of them into the constable's office was priceless. Surprise morphed into recognition combined with irritation, which then changed into shock, followed by dread and, no doubt, the recognition that he had been caught. Fendig's eyes danced between them and their captive wildly, and his jaw worked as though he was struggling to find words to say.
"Look what we found, Fendig," Julian said with a jolly grin. "Care to open up a cell for us?"
Fendig nodded quickly and pulled out the cell door keys, then led them back into the cell block.
"We caught this fellow and his two friends about 4 miles east of town. They attacked us on sight. Between that and their attire, they're Eisenhoff's men for sure."
Fendig nodded quickly. His hands trembled as he turned the key in the lock of the third cell door on the right.
"Where are the others?"
he asked, a noticeable tremble in his voice.
Still out there.
Raedric made a vague gesture toward the east.
Scavengers need to eat, too.
Fendig paled. Gulping, he swung the cell door open and waited while Julian shoved the brigand inside. Then he moved quickly to slam the door shut and lock it. As he turned the key in the lock, Fendig avoided looking at the brigand, who was slowly collecting himself. Rubbing at his wrists where Julian had bound him, the brigand almost looked grateful to be in the cell and untied. Except for the venomous look he directed at Julian and Raedric, and the look of contempt he reserved for Fendig.
"Let me out of here, constable, or you'll be sorry," the brigand growled.
Fendig blanched and turned away.
"Now, that sounds familiar, doesn't it, Ray?"
Julian said. Raedric nodded and fixed Fendig with a piercing gaze.
"The first thug we brought in said almost the same thing to you, Fendig."
"Well, why shouldn't he? Until you guys came here, they pretty much had free reign. I expect he thought Mallory and the mayor would be too intimidated to keep him."
"He thought wrong."
The brigand barked out a mocking laugh.
"Wrong. They released him with apologies, didn't they?"
Raedric favored him with a smirk.
"Because we told them to, so we could follow him back to your hideout."
The brigand's eyes widened momentarily, his mocking grin slipping a bit. He glanced from Raedric to Fendig and back and ran his tongue over his lips as though suddenly uncertain of himself. Julian couldn't help but chuckle. Turning back to Fendig, Raedric's smile faded, replaced by a grim expression.
"Of course, both he
jerked his thumb toward the locked-up brigand,
and the first guy asked you, not Mallory. Almost seemed like he knew you."
Fendig spluttered.
"Preposterous! I introduced myself when you came in, and this guy knows they have Mallory captive, so he can't be constable anymore."
His tone was affronted, but his expression was frightened. The little weasel knew he was caught, but was trying to feed them a line anyway? He had more nerve than Julian thought. Raedric nodded slowly, and pursed his lips in the way he did while considering something carefully. After a moment, he looked at Julian and gave a little shrug.
"Relax, Fendig,"
Julian said as he stepped forward to clap the deputy on the shoulder.
"It's just that we've been thinking Eisenhoff must have a mole here in town, so we followed you this afternoon."
Fendig's eyes went wide and he tried to pull away. Too late, little man. Julian took a firm grip on the former deputy's forearm and used his own momentum to twist the arm behind his back, slamming him into the bars of the cell next to the brigands.
"How long have you been feeding them information, you slimy little worm?"
Julian growled into his ear. Fendig cried out in a mixture of pain and despair. Tears welled up in his eyes, but he did not say anything. Next to him, the brigand's eyes grew even wider, then narrowed in chagrin. There would be no release for him. Not unless Eisenhoff emerged victorious. That had to look like long odds from where he was sitting. Julian snatched the cell keys from Fendig's hand and tossed them back to Raedric, who proceeded to open the cell across the hall from the brigand. As he pulled Fendig away from the bars and shoved him into his new cell, Julian quipped, "Enjoy your stay."
And the rat is caught. Bad Fendig, bad. Bad Fendig. I never liked that guy. Even though I made him. tricked me. Anyway, I hope you like that. We are coming towards the end of the book. There's like 32 chapters in this book, so about one third remaining, and getting on towards a super action-packed finish that you're going to love. So make sure you come back here next week and the week after and the week after to follow the rest of the story. And of course, on Saturday we do Story Saturday, where I share other things that I've written, usually short works. Occasionally I have serialized longer stuff on Story Saturday, but for now at least we're just doing short stories, just because I got a lot of them. A whole lot. And so we're doing that. The rest of the week we occasionally talk about writing things or fun stuff that props to mind that I see. Music. And every now and then I get in here and play a video game, because I always liked video games, but I haven't done it very much the last several years just because I've been busy. This channel seems like a great excuse to do it. I just haven't been, and I've been meaning to get back into that. So we'll see when we're going to start that back up. Anyway, hope you liked this. If you did, let me know. Hit it, like it, send me a fun comment. Go buy a book. I know. How can you do that? Well, here, let me show you. All right, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hey, Kingswood, I love that story. How can I buy your books? Great question. Here's the answer. Best way to buy my books is to come over to my site, michaelkingswood.com/store. That will bring you to this place, which is my company's store, where you can get books, merchandise, all kinds of great stuff that I've set up. And but you're wondering how it works. Well, here, let's check out Glimmer Chronicles, which is my heroic fantasy series that I've talked a lot about. If you haven't read it yet, you really should. It's a super fun series. Everything you would want. You should start with Glimmer, which is the first book. Come over here to Glimmer. It'll load up. Hey, look at that. You get the book description, links to other books in the series, great stuff. And you can pick the format you want. You got ebook, trade paperback, and audiobook. Not everything I've written is an audiobook yet, but almost everything's a trade paperback and everything's an ebook. But like, hey, I know what you're thinking. Hey, I'm buying from you. How do I get the ebook? There's a service that I work with called BookFunnel. When you buy from my site, they will send you a link. That link will lead you to a page where they will walk you through how to load your ebook onto the device you're choosing, or you can just download it to computer and do whatever you want with it. So that way it's easy peasy. Maximum profit for me. All kinds of fun for you. But I know, a lot of you guys, you like your Kindles, you like your other things, and you want to go straight to the retailer, and that's fine. You can come over here to michaelkingswood.com/books2read, the number 2. And I have this handy dandy universal book link aggregator page set up. You can scroll through, look at all my stories, all my books, and pick which one you want, and then go from there. Here's how it works. Let's do Glimmer again. So Glimmer, first book in the series, you click on it, you get this thing, you get the book description, you get all other books in the series, and you say, get it now. Okay, get it now. Look what happens. Every retailer where you can find it is here. You can pick the one that you like best and say, okay, cool. Well, let's say I wanted to buy it in, I don't know, let's just say Kobo, because why not? Click on it. And then it'll ask you, is this your favorite store? If so, you set it. So every time you come back, you don't have to choose. It'll just go take you to your favorite store. But let's just, you don't have to do that. Well, we're going on to Kobo. Booyah. Hey, look at this. Here it is on the Kobo site. People like it. People have bought it. Good stuff. Links to other things of mine. And, or you can do one of the other stores that you like. Either way, you get the book you like. I get money. It's all good.